and I'll go ahead and start the introductions.
Okay, you're all set. Go for it.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Sally Michael, and I'm here today along with my colleague Sue to talk to you about the Board of Trustees Key Performance Indicator Dashboards. We're both from the Office of Planning and Budgeting at the University of Illinois System. Before I go into too much detail, I just want to mention this is part one of a two-part presentation. Our presentation will focus on the upper level demo of the dashboards, give you some background in the history, and talk a little bit about the data and the collaboration that we do with our colleagues at the three universities. And then following this will be part two, which will be more of a technical dive. Nick and Chris, two of our other colleagues of planning and budgeting, will take you through that. So I hope you have an opportunity to participate in both of these presentations, and if not, I believe they're both also recorded. So before I dive too deeply into the dashboards, I just want to take a quick minute or so to talk about who planning and budgeting is for those of you who may not be familiar with us. As I said, I'm from the University of Illinois System. Just very briefly, we have three universities within the system. We have the Research One land grant flagship institution at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign, which is where I'm located. We also have the University of Illinois Chicago, which is also a Research One large institution in a public setting with a large healthcare medical emphasis. And finally, there's the University of Illinois Springfield, which is a smaller liberal arts institution located in Springfield with a fairly long history of doing online programming, something that we're all getting used to these days. So planning and budgeting sits at the university offices over top of this whole structure. We are the institutional research arm for the system. And but we do a lot of collaboration with our IR offices in the university settings in the three institutions underneath us. As the name implies, we're planning and budgeting. So we do a lot of budget development and analysis. For example, our board meeting on Thursday, we will be presenting the budget request for the next fiscal year. And then we do the institutional research, which means we fulfill statutory budgeting and data reporting requirements for the state of Illinois and federal government. We do a lot of external communications. At the system level, we support the executive offices, including the president. We do a lot of work with the CFO's office, as well as the Vice President of Academic Affairs office, which is also our executive VP, as well as other system services. So we do the same thing a lot of IR offices do as far as reporting, analytical analyses, creating visualizations and projects and processes. So more information, this is our website, more information about us can be found on this website. And because of this role, we also support the Board of Trustees, which is how we came to be doing the Board of Trustees dashboards. Now, this is a project that actually has a fairly long history, but over the last, say, year and a half, we've done a major transition into a web-based dynamic environment using Tableau visualizations, and that's what we're presenting to you today. So I will say that it is public facing. There's a link right off of our main website under other system services. And also, the Board of Trustees will always, for each of the 6 meetings a year, will publish a list of agenda and meeting materials, and there will be a link to these as well at that location. So if you want to go look at it now or in the future, an easy way to get to it is through our website.
Hey, Sally, I'm going to jump in.
So this is the link.
Chat. Hey, Sally. There's some folks in the chat saying that,
yes.
I can see it too, that the presentation has not advanced past the very first slide. So I don't know if you are.
Okay. So are you not seeing it should be showing the my web browser.
No,
all it's showing is
Board of
the,
Trustees Key Performance Indicators Dashboards Part 1.
Okay, so let me see. Let me do something.
You
Let
might
me
be
try
sharing your
sharing.
PowerPoint instead of your screen.
You know, it's not showing me the option to share my screen.
Sadly, I think it's fine though, because the next slide is not about what you're talking about. So the first
Okay,
slide
well,
is okay.
I'm going to switch over. Okay, well, thanks for letting me know. Are you seeing my screen now? The Google, or
Now
not
I
Google,
see it.
Chrome now?
Yes. Now I see it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because before when I'd open this up, I could share my screen. But anyhow, let's go forward. We'll work with this. So anyhow, so this is the landing page of the dashboards, and I'll just show you again. This is how you can get to it from within the planning and budgeting website. So if I do that, well, it doesn't matter. I can go ahead and do that. No. There we go. This is a public website. And as I mentioned before, it's available through our planning and budgeting website, as well as through the Board of Trustees meeting and agenda notes. That said, it really is not the main public data display of the university. That's located off of our main website for the University of Illinois Systems under a link called Data. And it functions differently. So I just want to touch base on what is different about it. Well, for one, it's driven by the Board of Trustees' needs and desires. So these are the metrics that they have selected in coordination with us and the universities to provide feedback on the performance of our 3 university systems. So it functions differently in that regard. You'll also see as you get into it that here's a sample. It shows trend data, usually 5 to 6 years. It also shows data about our peers for comparisons analysis. It's at the university level. You can't drill down to academic units or academic programming. In most cases, you don't see system data. So that's another difference. And of course, these are measurable metrics of interest to the Board of Trustees. In addition, we provide a means for providing some context at the university level, some feedback that's short and sweet to help explain what the users may be seeing. So that's the main difference between this and, say, the enrollment information or the information about faculty that you would be seeing in a typical data screen coming off of our site or through another IR office. And another thing about this, and I want to mention again, there's a lot of collaboration going on here. We, as planning and budgeting, have built this tool. We collect the data, but then we send it out to the universities, the 3 universities, for them to add comment and context to it, for them to review the data. They have a lot of feedback into what's displayed as well. So it definitely is a collaborative project. There are about 100 metrics. Well, I think it's a little over 100 metrics that are displayed in here. So it's a fairly comprehensive set of information.
Hey, Sally,
So let's
I'm
go
gonna
back to
jump
the
in
link.
again.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm looking for the URL to access this, and by going by what you have in your browser there, it doesn't take you directly to it. So you said this is a public website? Do you have
Okay.
a link you could share in the chat maybe?
Yeah, hold on a second here. Let me go all the way. There's a link all the way at the end of my slides.
Or if you just copy and paste from your browser, from the address bar, that would work too.
Okay. Yeah, you probably don't need, let me see if I can, my problem is I have to figure out how to get back to the chat box now. Here we go. Nope.
Should be along the top. There's a menu.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, well, there we go. I'm seeing it. I'm having trouble getting to it. I'm sorry. I'm clicking on it, but I am not seeing it pop up on my screen.
All right, I think I got it. Just go ahead and continue. I'll share it.
If not, I will gladly share it at the end. Okay, so let's go back to the landing page. Oh, here, now it pops up. Nope.
It's okay. I've posted it. You can continue your
Oh,
presentation.
okay. Sorry about that. Anyhow, so this is the landing page. There's really not too much to show on here. One thing we do is we highlight the information that's recently been updated. We actually just published an update yesterday in preparation for the Board of Trustees meeting. Other than that, you have the basic navigation at the top. It's 7 large boxes. This is the landing page. And then the 6 other boxes are basically our large content areas. You'll see that students' information is located through the first 2 of these navigation boxes. Student data is really probably the heavy hitter as far as metrics are concerned. We also have faculty and scholarship data. We have finance and productivity. This one kind of came late to the game based on a request from the CFO. So that's the one area that kind of has a different look and feel to it and may not have all the information at the university level. It may be the overarching system level. Since we have 2 Research One universities as part of the system, there's a research and technology transfer information available, and finally advancement. So I want to point out, as you click into one of these, and we'll do faculty and scholarship to start, you'll see a second navigation bar with push buttons or whatever shows up underneath the main content areas with the sub-content areas. So for example, for faculty, you'll see faculty demographics, salary migration, and class size and student to faculty ratios. And you can simply select between those. Now, underneath that, you'll see 3 icons that tie to our universities. And by clicking one of these icons, you'll switch between data for the different universities. I will say that as then you navigate around through the different metrics, you will maintain that selection. And a couple other things about this. Well, you can see that we selected UIC here. You can also see that the logo will be at the top of the actual visualization, and the main graph will usually be color coded to give you another additional feedback as to which of the 3 you're looking at. So for example, Springfield's blue, Urbana-Champaign is orange, and Chicago's red. So that's the main navigation to get to the individual metric areas, but there's one more set I want to point out. Once, for example, we're in graduation and retention, then we have, let's see, in this case, 5 different metrics that you can choose between. And so there's a little more navigation within the content areas on the actual visualization itself. And as you select those, you'll see the information changes appropriately. Beneath that, you'll also see an opportunity to, again, switch between one of the 3 universities. And finally, a legend at the bottom. So I want to point out a couple different things. Of course, on your right, we have the data itself. You'll see a series of bar graphs, and the bars will always represent our university data. And then oftentimes you'll have line graphs, and that's the peer comparison data. Now it's summarized, so you'll usually see a median and oftentimes the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile for the peers. Another thing to notice is that you'll see we have data, as the board would want, for the most recent years for our graduations, but we really will lag behind based on what's available in the external data systems, oftentimes iPads, for our peers. So as soon as the data comes available, we start working with that. This table at the bottom always reflects the same data that's seen in the graphs. So sometimes we add a few notes here about the information you're seeing, especially if we're missing some of our peer data. And then this section at the top here is really where the campuses or the universities provide context to what we're looking at. So for example, there's always a summary statement if it makes sense, and then up to 3 comments that are provided by universities. And these are short and sweet, intended to be just quick takeaways, which is something that as we moved into this visual web-based system, we had a lot of conversation, because typically in the past, when we were in a PowerPoint environment, the universities had a little more flexibility in providing additional content, often adding additional slides to a PowerPoint deck. 3 other things I want to point out just as far as navigation and information. There's a link at the top that if you click on that, you will get a list of the full metric inventory, and it's organized in the same way the navigation is, by main content, sub-content areas. This is live, so for example, you can click on one and you can switch over to whatever metric you see. Another small little hidden link is over here on the right, where you can see into our the list of who our peers are for each of the institutions. And each of the 3 universities provided that list of peers, and it has actually gotten updated a couple different times. And finally, at the bottom, there's one more piece of navigation. And this is the link you see here to download data. It's always an Excel spreadsheet that gets downloaded. Sometimes it's summary data, sometimes it isn't. Let's see if we can bring that up, and it's not going to let you see it, but I think I can now go. You're probably not seeing that, correct? Let me do this. There. And this kind of gives you an idea of what it looks like. In this case, you're actually downloading the data sets for all the different metrics in this area. This is something we're a little inconsistent in that some of the areas you'll actually get the comments downloaded as well. And one of the things we have to do is go back and tweak a few items as we've completed the transition. Now it's time to go back and do some tweaks, including consistency and things like this. So I'm going to go ahead and close that and take you back, if I can, to, okay, back to our navigation. So anyhow, that's kind of how all the screens work. Again, you can flip between them, select your metrics. And that's kind of what I wanted to show you as far as the main navigation screens. Now, I just want to touch a little bit in the tools that we use to make this happen.
Sam, you're not sharing your screen right now, just so you know.
I'm not
seeing you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Now I am, right? This got a lot more complicated than it was when I was testing this out. Anyhow, so I just want to talk a little bit about the tools and technologies beneath this. Since it is on our website, we are on the planning and budgeting website, we use Cold Fusion. So there's a Cold Fusion technology behind this, a little bit of JavaScript. We also use Tableau for visualizations. We have Tableau Desktop at planning and budgeting, and then the university has a Tableau server from where the content's getting served. Now, if you can see, you might see that this area is a little bit darker, has like a gray cast to it. That's the actual Tableau visualization. In order to make the navigation smoother for jumping between the different areas and staying on the same university, most of the navigation is actually taking place outside of the Tableau and using JavaScript and some of the other tools for web navigation. So the data itself, both the raw data that we will bring in from different sources, as well as the final look and feel of the data that gets displayed here, is stored within our Microsoft SQL Server databases. And as far as what we store, we also store these comments underneath there as well. Periodically, probably about once a year, we archive all of this so we can go back to prior years and know exactly what information was pushed up here if there should come into question. The other thing we do, if you're familiar with a Tableau, Tableau will allow you to create what's called an extract of the underlying data. So rather than display the data live from the Microsoft SQL Server, we display an extract. And this allows for better performance, but it also allows us to update the data, review it in a development environment, and then once we're comfortable with everything, push it out into publication to the public site. So let's see. One more thing that I wanted to bring up, let's see, is that we have used a tool called Alteryx as well to do what's called extract, transform, and load some of our data sets. One of the things we did as we moved into this visual environment was to try to automate some of the data update. A lot of it underneath this is from iPads, and iPads has a way for you of bringing in the large full data sets and then extracting it. So we used a tool called Alteryx to make that happen. So that's all. That's what I wanted to show in the demo. At this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'll let Sue present some more information, and then I'll meet you at the end again.
Thanks, Sally. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just going to add a little bit about the history of our KPI project. On March 1st, 2011, our board of trustee chairman, Chris Kennedy, asked our office to compile dashboards for our campuses, and then he sent us a sample. Then we started having meetings and discussion from May to August of 2011. So after a few discussions, we used PowerPoint to create various types of dashboards submitted to him and the committee to discuss. And then we displayed different kinds of metrics using peer averages.
Something something happened with your presentation. Now all we see is a black screen. Oh, there it is.
I'm sorry.
Okay. It's back.
Yeah.
Yeah, our university networks.
Yeah, it's very slow.
Going on.
So sorry. So we use PowerPoint to create various types of dashboards, displaying different kinds of metrics using peer averages and percentiles to compare with our campuses. So then in January 2012, a few metrics were presented to BOT, and subsequently more metrics were added. The next slide shows you an example of a dashboard metrics that we first started in 2012, and all these are in PowerPoint. And then in July of 2013, we divided this full version dashboard into 6 mini updates following the meeting schedule, the BOT meeting schedule. They meet every other month starting from January. Then in November 2019, that's when we switched from using the static PowerPoint graphs to Tableau and create an online dynamic dashboard that Sally has shown you earlier. In our part 2 presentation this afternoon, later, Chris and Nick will go into detail of how they built that Tableau dashboard. The next slides are the metrics that we use. They are grouped into 6 areas. I'm going to share. Let me see. I'm going to share. Yeah. So this table shows you all the 6 areas of the metrics that we use. Last times we update them according to the BOT meeting schedules, and also you can see that in column C it shows you the details of each of the areas, and it consists of specific metrics that we use, and we update them from January to November as in column A. However, starting from this November, the KPI updates have changed from 6 times a year to 3 times a year, which will be October, February, and June. You can see the change in column D. We chose these 3 months to update because that's when the most recent campus data and peer institution data will be available. Column D also shows you the data sources that we use. There were 2 parts of updates to each of the metrics area. Part 1 is when campus data are available, and part 2 is when peer institutional data are available. In the sorry, I need to go back to the PowerPoint slide. Okay. This slide shows you all our data source, majority of our data sources. Most of our KPIs use IPAS data, and other data sources are University of Illinois Enterprise Data Warehouse, Common Data Set, VSC Data Miner, and so forth. For our peer groups, we changed peer institutions a few times as requested by campuses. We used to have additional peer groups that include aspirational peer institutions, Chicago area peer institutions, and advancement peer institutions. So you can see that it gets very labor intensive when they change peer groups. If you were to display all this 5 to 6 years of data in a PowerPoint slides. So then we stopped using additional peer groups when we switched to Tableau. The latest number of peer institutions are 9 for UIUC. As you can see, next slide, these are the 9. And next is UIC, and then next one is UIS. UIC and UIC peer groups are all public 4-year institutions, with the exception of UC Berkeley. All institutions grant medical degrees, and the highest degree offer doctoral and professional degrees. And UIS peer groups are all public 4-year institution also, but they do not grant medical degrees, and the highest degree offer are either master's degree, doctoral degrees, and professional degrees. Next, Sally will discuss about collaboration and logistics of this KPI project.
Okay, we should be back on my screen now. If I'm not, just let me know. Anyhow, I wanted to talk a little bit about the collaboration and the logistics of how this works. And I want to start by explaining it in terms of how we used to do it in the past before we transitioned, just to give a little bit of context. So the board meets 6 times a year. For each of these 6 times, we would have a subset of the metrics in the past years that we would update and push out for each of the 3 universities in the form of a PowerPoint. This is just an example. What you're seeing is the PowerPoint that was for October of 2018, developed in October for the November board meeting for Urbana-Champaign. And so you'll see, we always showed the peer groups. And so at some point, you'll start seeing the set of graphs that look pretty similar to what we're now displaying, but they, of course, were static graphs. So what I have here to show you, oh, and I have to stop sharing and let me get back to the presentation here in a second, is kind of an overview of how this all happened. So the board would send out an email about a week after the completion of one of the board meetings, and it would announce the next meeting as well as deadlines. We would then take that and we would send another communication via email to our collaborators on the campuses or the universities, announcing the deadlines tied to the Board of Trustees metrics. We would also provide a list of metrics because it was 6 times per year. So for example, we would provide the list in September of all the faculty metrics we were updating. And then in November, we would be focusing on enrollments and admissions and the degree completions from the prior year. So at the same time this was happening, Sue was getting together another contact out to the content providers to say, hey, it's time for X to get updated, who would then go out and start collecting the data. Now, I will say this, in a lot of cases, it was Sue, especially if the word IPES was used. So she would go out to the IPES data center and pull together all the information tied to our universities as well as the peers. We then create Excel tables and graphs that would then get put into a PowerPoint deck for each of the 3 universities. We'd add comments and notes to give some context to it, have an internal review, and then we'd take those 3 PowerPoints and we'd send them out to our university contacts. The primary contact is always someone within the chancellor's office who really is the point person for the communications and the PowerPoints. However, we also, at that point, we are also including the institutional research office, who I'll give kudos for pretty much being the people that really made sure the data was correct and double check that. But at that point, they would take that PowerPoint slide deck and they would edit it. They would add their own comments, context. They may actually, and oftentimes, added additional slides to talk about related subjects. For example, if they had an initiative for underrepresented minorities, they might add 2 or 3 slides explaining that and how that fit into the metrics. They would then send that PowerPoint deck directly onto the Board of Trustees office, who would post it in the meeting and agenda notes. That was the old system. So what we did when we implemented is we kind of kept this same cycle. There's 6 board meetings a year. All the metrics get covered in one of those 6 board meetings. So we built the framework, and then starting last November, we started updating that framework with live Tableau visits. And so the other areas may just have a placeholder that would essentially be the graphics pulled out of the PowerPoint and just kept there until we got to that point. So let's take a look at what this really, let's see, I need to, here we go. Let's take a look at this transition time frame, which took the course of 1 year. As I said, we started doing last November, we started pushing this out. Yes?
We're still looking at the same, oh no, now it progressed. Okay, apologies, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it did progress. It looks very similar. So because it's a very similar process. So if it was November, we were talking student enrollments. The board still sent out an email announcing the deadlines. We then sent out an email to the contacts for the dashboard metrics that announced our internal deadlines for that, as well as what content would be updated. Sue still went out and started contacting contacts and collecting data, but we had another process over here on the side that Nick and Chris were involved in. They would start developing Tableau visualizations for this next round of metrics. And then that actually, and updating the navigation to as needed to put those into the system. And we'd conduct an internal review as each of the visualizations would come to fruition. Now, there's one other difference I want to point out. I mentioned, Sue and content providers were going out and collecting data. As we moved along, we started looking at ways to automate the input of the data. So we weren't going out and creating those Excel spreadsheets, but especially when we're talking about the slew of data that comes in from iPads and HERDS, the NSF data, we've tried to automate that as much as possible. So now there are processes in place that when iPads updates those large data sets, and Chris can talk more about this in part 2, we can hit a button and bring all that data in. We still have a process in-house, primarily Sue, validates and verifies that data, takes a look at what's being displayed over off in the design area to make sure we're collecting their data correctly. For example, sometimes in some of our data collections, we had missing data from different universities. So we double check that the medians make sense and we're calculating everything correctly. Sometimes we notice, like even in iPads, you'll notice some anomalies with some of the data the peers have presented, and we're not sure, is the data correct or have they changed their methodologies? So those are the kinds of questions we're asking at that stage. And then we update the comments as needed. So instead of sending them out a PowerPoint deck, we send out a link to the dev site for the universities to review tricks and add comments, etc. Now, in order for them to be able to update the comments, we also send out a spreadsheet. So in that spreadsheet is like one record per metric. And then there's the comment section where they can go in and edit. They send that back and then we upload it to our database. So that's a little different. And then finally, when everybody's satisfied that the comments are updated, the data's good, we then publish it, the dashboard, to the production site that's on the public facing site in time for the next Board of Trustees meeting. So we did this for a year. And at the end of the year, then we had visited each of the metrics and updated the Tableau. One of the things we noticed is that 6 times a year is a lot of times for us to be going through this process. It's a bit exhausting. So as we move in the next phase, as new data becomes available, we're going to start publishing. We've gotten away from publishing or going along with the schedule of 6 Board of Trustees meetings to an update process that only occurs 3 times a year based on when data is available. Now that said, we know that in November, they want to see enrollments, they want to see the admissions pipeline coming into the fall, and they want to see the degrees. So we still have some tie-in to the Board of Trustees discussions that are going on, but it's looser. So for example, for this November meeting, we're talking enrollments, we would go in and we updated the enrollments from our universities, but we didn't have new data for our peers because the iPads data isn't available yet. So we'll update that in a second cycle in February, along with some other data based primarily in iPads publications. And then in May, we'll finish off the process. So now 3 times a year, we'll be going out to the universities with this review cycle. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about, the collaboration and the logistics. Just very briefly, I just want to touch on some of the challenges that we've had in the past and currently have. There have been many. One of the reasons we wanted to go to an interactive Tableau visualization was the dashboards that we had created as PowerPoints were really starting to get buried and forgotten. They've been around for a while, so there has been turnover with our board members as well as our senior executives. And while the data was very good and they were interested in those topics, they tended to not look at those PowerPoints. What we noticed was the PowerPoints were getting posted to the Board of Trustees meeting information, but people weren't looking at them. There weren't actual presentations around them. So that was one of the challenges we had, and we hope by putting this in a public uh, putting a public face and a visualization to it, we can really give it the um, really give it some attention and start to have people go out there to look for this kind of information before they ask. But we all know what happens, so we'll see how that goes. As Sue mentioned, PowerPoints were very updated. The updates were very labor intensive, and Sue Sue did a lot of that, which is why she brought that up. Kudos for her for
Thank you.
making it through there. The campuses want to tell their stories, and as you noticed, we allow them to put up to 3 comments at the top of these pages, um, but they used to add a lot more content. And we intentionally had a lot of discussions around this because there wasn't a lot of real estate for one thing to put in a lot more than those 3 comments. And we know that most of the time the board members don't want to go into a deep dive. They just want a short and sweet story. But we still feel that that's not adequate. So that's something we hope to address. Collecting the campus comments via this Excel spreadsheet going back and forth isn't ideal. That was one of the challenges that we're looking at resolving soon. One of the concerns that I have, and I'm sure others share, is that as we start automating the update of the data coming in, you're just not looking at the information as closely. There's less eyes on the data. And so, as I mentioned, oftentimes what we see is we'll collect the data and then there's going to be anomalies show up. We may see 1 or 2 of our peers with information that just looks a little off when we're looking, for example, at faculty size or demographics. And in the past, it was a lot easier to see that as we're putting things together and go out and ask them or double check on that. So we want to make sure we don't miss out on those things. Another challenge that Sue mentioned, if our peers groups change or say some data from the past changes, we need to make sure that we go back and not only update the current year data, but get back and update those other years. And sometimes this can be labor intensive, and we also have to make sure we catch it. Another challenge, just missing data from peer institutions. iPads, of course, everybody has data in there, but once we go to things like, for example, the AAUP faculty salary data, not all our peers necessarily will contribute data and participate in that. And that can cause some problems because instead of having a peer median based on, say, 10 or 9 or 10 of our peers, it's based on 2 or 3 or 4 sometimes, and that can skew the view and just make that comparison a little odd. And we see who participates in some of these change from year to year as well. And so it just depends on who's participating sometimes when that N gets pretty low. Somebody had asked about accessibility. And I think Chris presented something in another session, but what happened is we have a Board of Trustees member that has visual impairments. And so we originally looked at approaching accessibility very similarly to what a lot do by providing tables and downloading Excel spreadsheets and such. And that just didn't cut the mustard. This Board of Trustees member really pushed us to really think about how to make this very, very accessible. And if you have interest in that, I would highly recommend you contact Chris because he spent quite a bit of time trying to work through this, working with both the board member as well as someone else that he works with that has similar issues with visual impairment to get this really truly accessible. It took a lot of effort and it continues to take effort. And then finally, the last challenge I want to just touch on, because we're running low on time and I'm almost done here, is the availability of data, peers versus our data. I mean, I talk about missing data, but also peer data sometimes is available in a different cycle from our data. You know, we get enrollments pretty quickly for us, of course, but we have to wait for the peers. So instead of updating all the enrollment data in one fell swoop in November, now we're actually updating enrollment in 2 cycles. We update ours in the first cycle in November, and then February, we'll update the peers. And this is true for several other types of data outside of enrollment. So where do we go from here? As I mentioned, the universities want to add more context and content area, tell their stories a little more. We think we'll do that in the form of a PDF with a link onto our dashboards, recognizing there just isn't the real estate to do it on the screen itself. So we're still working through that. That's probably in the next few months, something we'll be addressing. We want to look to comments that the campuses or the universities provide some feedback, make that more automated. We have some ideas on that. We need to tweak the visualizations. I mentioned, like, if you download the Excels, they don't quite look the same depending on what you're downloading. And finally, document. This was a pretty aggressive project to date. We really haven't taken the time we need to take to document everything, all the underlying processes, as well as the display. So with that, I am going to open it up for questions. I think we have about a little less than 15 minutes. This slide displays Sue's as well as my contact information. You're welcome to use it. Contact us. The website I gave, Planning and Budgeting, that also has a link, as well as the link to the Board of Trustees metrics. And we will be sharing the PowerPoint out to somehow or another. I'm not sure how if we're doing that. So for the attendees, so this will be available through that. So I'm going to stop my sharing. And let's see, what questions do we have?
I haven't seen any new questions come in since the accessibility question. Oh, here we go from Laura.
Great to be able to access up-to-date data. Historically, any concerns about documenting the actual data used for specific decision making? I'll try to address that. I'm not sure I quite understand the question. I know back in the old days when we had these PowerPoints, that's kind of served as our archive of data. There are notes and such that go back and forth between different people in the form of emails. Sometimes those get stored out. We have a little folder on our share that we put a lot of the intermediary kinds of things into. I don't know, Sue, do you want to chime in here?
Well, majority of our data came from iPads. So iPads data are from the survey. So they are all as of 4 terms. So if anybody has question about the past year's data, I usually go back to iPads to double check, like, has the data been updated, been changed, and then go from there.
Did that answer the question?
Hi, Sue and Sally. I have a question. This is Angela Boniface from Western. You guys did a great job. It looks awesome. You can tell you put a lot of work into it. So my question is regarding your iPads peer group. Did you self-select your iPads peer group, or was it the assigned IPEDS peer group that they can give you? And then can you talk a little bit about your process and how you select your peer groups? Is it faculty driven or?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't go into detail about how the peer groups were being decided. And actually, the work is done by campuses. They form committee and they do, they research on institutions, which institutions they would like to include or exclude. So we have no decision on which peer institution to add. They all came from the campuses.
I think when it first started out, they might have started with the IBHE peer groups.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
we found
yeah.
that we found that like our IBH peer groups, for example, had a lot of private peers, which really don't fit us very well anymore. So that was one of the reasons for going away from it. Yeah, they've been tweaked several times by by the universities themselves, and they have a lot of latitude in who they pick. But that said, Sue, when did they update last? Was it 2017?
No, October 2018.
2018.
Yeah.
What we found is that as Springfield updated their peer group, the peers make a lot of sense, but we're missing data for a lot of the peers in some areas because they don't participate, for example, in AAUP as much. And so that's caused a little bit of heartburn for us as far as how to handle some of the data. I believe, I'm trying to look, I think that really comes into play under the faculty demographics for Springfield sometimes. Is that right, Sue? Is that the one where we're really missing data?
Yeah, like University of Baltimore. Yeah, most of their data are not available. And also common data sets can be a problem too. Like some university, they would not publish their common data sets. So we have to really email them, request them one by, individually. So that can be a pain to collect too.
I noticed Matt has asked, how big is the data team behind the KPI dashboards? Does Sue create everything? She feels like she creates everything. And back in the old days, she was the iPads person, which, as we mentioned, a lot of this is iPads. But it's mostly people within planning and budgeting. I grab some of the data for faculty, survey and doctorates. I used to grab some of the NSF. Chris and Nick have really been the ones that have gone out with the data automation to bring in the iPads data and the NSF HER data automatically. So it varies. I'm trying to think who are other collaborators too.
Just you, me, Chris, and Nick, 4 of us.
So yeah, I think there was some that sometimes didn't we? I think we might have had one more person like Sandy.
Yeah, tuition and fees from Nick Wiles and Chris Smith. Yeah, definitely. He is the he created. He submit iPads he's our iPads key holders. So thanks to Chris, all our data we have to double check with him, and he's the one that actually compiled the iPads data for all all of us.
I do know, for example, for faculty salary, some of the tables that we create are very similar to things that we create for other purposes. So for example, we create tables that for our budget request that we then go ahead and use either directly or very indirectly as far as the peer comparison data for salaries. For example, one of the things we're doing with the salary data is adjusting it for regional cost of living. So that kind of stuff gets done once a year, and then we take a subset or a variation on the theme and just apply it here. And that saves a lot of work. Did we miss any questions, Katie or Kayla? Oh, no, Katie's.
No, I think you covered all of them from what I see, unless there's any new questions anybody has.
Well, if not, thank you for joining us today. It's been a
Thank you.
pleasure, and I encourage you to get into the technical side of it with Chris and Nick in a few minutes. So,
Yeah, we will share the PowerPoint slide and then that spreadsheet table that I posted just now. They're giving you the details of the metrics and the data source. So hopefully they'll be useful, for you guys.
I've also just shared a link to the session evaluation in the chat. So everybody who attended, if you could just take a moment, click on that link and complete the evaluation, we'd really appreciate it.
okay, well, bye, guys.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you. Thanks.